Hello, welcome back to my channel. I know I don't post very much, but I've been playing this very interesting mod called Nullius, where you're an android that's you're basically making all the biters. You end up making all the biters and the landscape of Novice, and it serves as a potential prequel to Factorio. Um, so I'm decently far in the mid game right now, and so I'll probably make a video now and then one more where at the end I'll show you everything that I have. Now seems to be a pretty good midpoint because I'm just a few texts before where I'm able to make my own like copies of myself so that I can be in multiple places of the map at once. And once I make that, I'll probably show it off on how that works. So I'm going to show the beginning of the game just so that people have an idea of how this mod works. And here we are. So at the beginning, when you load in, you start with basically just a couple of solar panels and for power. And a decently interesting thing about this game is that there's no fuel to burn. Because we're on an atmosphere without any life, so the atmosphere is primarily composed of carbon dioxide and nitrogen. And then later on, you can find some other stuff like argon and helium in the atmosphere. Um, so you can't actually burn any, there's no burnable fuel. So you have to rely on either solar power or wind power for like a steady supply of power. And that's actually pretty unique thing about Nullius, where the power generation is not, doesn't come from anything you mine, but more comes from these kind of random or wind power is totally random, whereas solar is like day and night cycles, and then you build makeshift batteries to power your base throughout the game. So you see here, you start off with a bunch of these broken machines. You get the tech to repair them at some point. Let me try to find. Yes, like such as this one, you can repair some of the solar panels, and it seems like you just add some sand to it. I don't really know why, but and then what you can do is you disassemble this. So you have to disassemble most of your broken ship. You can't keep any of this stuff here, except for this landing site ship. Except for this ship, you can keep that. Otherwise, you do have to disassemble these things like this landing site thing for just some power poles, and then this is your lab, and like this has some more lights and stuff. I think your first few like assembly machine will come from this. Yep, that's your one medium assembler, and your mining drills will come from this thing, and your furnace will come from this thing. And oh, and then even some. I think you pretty much have to disassemble everything here for all the starting supplies. Because the way that the tech works in this game mode is decently unique. So say you start off this thing, and this thing researches uh, just on its own. That's one of the things that actually stumps people. You just have to collect these three things in your inventory, and it'll research on its own. Maybe I'll just show it off since it probably doesn't take too long, right? So like I'll mine a couple of iron. And then a couple of sandstone. And and then a couple of bauxite, and you see that the research is going on its own. I'm trying to see that the lab actually flashes on its own too, just because you started the research. So this game mode is using a few different resources that you're other than what we're used to before. So there's no copper. So copper is actually even on Earth is fairly rare. Even though for some reason humans seem to know how to work with copper much longer than with iron. Even the Bronze Ages, they can smelt, but that's because the melting point of copper is a lot lower, and you can cast a lot of things. Whereas iron has more of it's hard to work with iron. You have to like hit it just to forge it. You have to heat it up to much higher temperatures, and then even then you have to make it into steel later on. So, but actually, copper is a lot more rare on Earth, and you don't get really much copper now anymore. So the few primary resources in here are iron, and then sandstone, which is a source of silicon, and then bauxite, which is a primary source of aluminum, and also there's limestone that doesn't seem to be here anywhere. Limestone is a source of calcium-containing inorganic rocks, and then there's these geothermal fumaroles that gives you volcanic gas, which is a source of sulfur. And then the other resources comes from the sea, where there's of course water, but there's also salt, there's chlorine, um, sodium, like sodium, salt, and chlorine, and then also basically you're mining a lot of things out of air. You're creating a lot of things out of air, which is pretty crazy. But I think in real life you can actually do that too. So air is a source of carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and later on there's some argon and helium, and then also out of the sea there's also lithium later on. Spoiler alert, maybe, I don't know. But yeah, you actually do not have to disassemble this thing, but you do get a little bit of bonus goodies, but I didn't. So let's get to my game now. Okay, and then moving on, where you have to make plastic. Where this is the first plastic recipe. It's the PVC plastic recipe, and you basically take ethylene, and which all components come from air, and then you take chlorine, and then you make plastic. Apparently, this is actually a real process that can be made, but that can be done in even real life. But because of how inefficient it is, you end up um, most of our plastic comes from oil, right? Like comes from one of the or I think the light part of the oil distilling process. So, but yeah, this is how you can make plastic. So this makes PVC, whereas this one is a polypropylene plastic, and it's a later recipe. It's using stuff that comes from alkene synthesis or alkane synthesis. No, alkene synthesis. Carbon monoxide plus hydrogen gives you these three different kinds of alkenes where you have to balance them. Very annoying, actually, because so say like this plastic recipe, it takes propene and ethylene, but at different uh, like different ratios, and so you end up having to burn some of it away in these. Um, I mean, I just like to call them boilers, but not boilers. It's a combustion chamber that has two inputs, and also two outputs. Uh, Pretty crazy, right? And even his new chemical plants have they have the ability to attach on the side. It's actually pretty interesting. I didn't know that. So then, some of my earlier machines, I ended up putting up like this weird pipe in between where it's not even necessary. I just kept it. I'm gonna be someone that disassembles my machines. And then another common theme that happens with this mod is you get better recipes as your tech goes on. So, say like for iron, for example, the first iron you just smelt the regular iron ore. You get two per regular iron ore, or you can add graphite into it, and then you take 11 crushed iron. But then say like crushed iron, you crush 6 iron, and that results in 5 per. I actually don't know if this uses ore. I think it does use ore a little better because then you output a stone, and then because with this you get quite a bit of waste gravel. This you get less waste gravel because this you get two plates or I mean ingots. You get 2 ingots and 1 gravel, whereas this recipe, you get 8 ingots and 2 gravel, so much less gravel. And I think waste product. I mentioned waste product management. So this gravel is a waste product. Chlorine is a waste product. Later on, there are some couple more other waste products. There's like salt, which you need, but it's also a waste product. So that's what happens. There's a lot of these waste products that end up getting used in recipes, but you have to balance them. So say like gravel, you need gravel to make. Um, I think to make the rails, for example, you need gravel for a decent number of recipes, right? Um, Yeah, you need gravel to make rail, you need gravel to make concrete, you need gravel to even make underground ground pipe tubes. But too much gravel will block up how much ore you can, how much of the metal refining that you can actually do, and then you need to dump gravel. So it's a balancing act where you need some of the you dump gravel with hydrochloric acid, which comes from hydrogen chloride plus water, and then the hydrogen chloride, of course, comes from the chlorine waste product that I've mentioned before. So yeah, you need hydrochloric acid, and that mixes with the gravel. Or I mean, you grind the gravel up, the gravel down to a mineral dust, and then and then it goes through this filtration plant, and it makes the and then it makes like the sludge. Where sludge is, I think you can later on there's tech that you could filter ores from. You could recycle the sludge, or you can actually make this landfill with sludge, or you just dump the sludge into the ocean. I mean, there's no way that this dumping ground that I have is probably like absolutely disgusting. I don't know how you can really simulate it, but we're also drawing water back up from it. It just magically becomes regular seawater. It's kind of funny. Um, so there's of course the first plastic is a very early tech item, and that's involved in making some of the first like the iron tech stuff. I think it goes from iron tech and then so iron, and then next thing is the aluminum. Aluminum processing is pretty complicated. You need this caustic solution to process the. You crush the bauxite, and when you crush bauxite, you actually get a bit of iron out of it, and then you also get sand. And so you take the crushed bauxite, and you actually have to run it through this flotation cell building. I think all these machines are actually decently realistic. You have like furnaces which add heat, and then you have also this thing called a foundry where I think you both add heat and you have to shape the things. Um, and then you have oh, by the way, all of these machines, none of these machines are burner machines. There are no burner machines in this mod. And I'll show you the train like vehicle fuel later on. But yes, none of these are burner machines. They all require electricity, even if they look like your old burner burner smelting furnaces. They're not. Um, and like I said, this graphite is not fuel. It's a I think it's a flux, if that's what they call it. Um, So the aluminum needs to be processed into aluminum hydroxide, and then that's burned into alumina, and then that alumina is burned into aluminum ingots, and then the ingots. Oh, and then also that outputs a bit of this aluminum carbide. Um, and all of these things are actually also used in some recipes, so you'll find that it's a little bit annoying later on. That's why I have this aluminum hydroxide splitting off into concrete. So and then another thing you'll notice with how metal is processed in this mod is that every metal, it becomes an ingot, and then it's made into a either a plate, a rod, or a wire, or a sheet. So aluminum, there's aluminum plate, aluminum rod, aluminum wire, and then aluminum sheets. And same with steel. There's steel plate, steel rod, steel sheet. Is there steel wire? Yes, there's steel wire. And then for steel, there's steel cable. And then there's also the steel beam. I think so. Yeah, steel beam. Um, the first couple like intermediate you get are is a motor, and then iron motor, and then an iron gear, and then you'll get steel motors and steel gear, and then I think there's a motor 3 later in my mall somewhere. And then at some point, you'll see that this mall's an absolute mess uh, with thrower, just because there's no way you can really make anything. And another interesting feature of this mod is that uh, they start off with there's no different. There's only one type of inserter. Like there's only there's this inserter, and then it's the same inserter that you want to make it into a long inserter. Yeah, like this. It'll just extend itself via the Bob's inserter mod. And but when what happens is that you don't actually get that tech until let's see where. It's kind of a little bit further down, right? Um, no, that's a thrower. Thrower actuation. No. Oh, and then I guess you don't even get to make any inserters until here. Um, but you do start off with a few, and then uh, nope, not even that. So and then that's it's like past the purple signs. Um, oh no, it's here. It's not past purple. It's here, extension. So it's decently far down. The ability. That's why I had to when I first started to belt it these intermediates. Because of the fact that they require four. This stupid little motor requires 4 inputs. So I had to like do it this way, where it outputs in between undergrounds. And I think even I had to do that for the gear. Even the gear requires 3 outputs. Um, Wait, no, maybe not. I think the gear. No, the gear is just 2 inputs, but I still did it this way so that some stuff can go in between. Um, the spaghetti here is like strong, and I don't know. I know people sometimes just after they make this, they tear it down and they replace it with their train grid. I'm someone that I just keep it. Um, and and then there's steel, and then what next? And then of course with the sandstone, you get sand, right? But so sand is pretty basic, a basic material. You don't do much with it. The important thing with sand is that you process it into silica, uh, where silica is the main thing, and silica becomes silicon, and also becomes this um, very advanced type of silicon later on. Um, and also, actually, the sand is a source of rutile, which becomes titanium. But that's a uh, pretty later on material. And and then another feature of this mod is this pressure thing, where there's 4 types of pipes. There's the regular pipe. I think the pipes are also found in Bob's mods, but then there's a red pipe, a blue pipe, and a black pipe. The and then you have this thing here where this tank, right? With the regular pipes, where this pipe will only go up to 40% pressure, so this tank will only fill up to about 40% with a regular pipe. With the red pipe, it's 60%. So if you don't have a pump, this tank will fill about 60%. And then that actually, that part's important because it actually gives you a way of controlling flow into these tanks without using wires and stuff. You actually, even the wires you don't get until decently into the game. Like let's basically you have to make a circuitry. So you don't get any circuit boards like the green circuits until much later on in the game. And of course we don't have copper, so we're making circuitry out of aluminum, basically aluminum and plastics, I think. So let's see where it is. It's actually like all the way down here, right? Um, Here, electronics, and so you make a logic circuit, and that's it's both a this is a decider combinator. It's both a decider combinator and it's also an intermediate. It's basically equivalent of like a green circuit board if you want to look at it that way. Um, and then that you when you make wires, you need that plus an insulated wire to actually make these circuit wires. And even then, there's for the arithmetic combinator, you need to add uh, the other the decider combinator plus a constant combinator, and even constant combinator you need to add like a capacitor into the decider combinator. And this wire, yeah, this wire is decently far down, so you don't actually get to use that. But you have these valves where this is a top-up valve, so it will only fill a tank up to about 50%. And then you have relief. I mean, this is an auxiliary valve, I guess, because this is one of the basically you auxiliary valve kind of it's kind of like it makes this direction like a secondary direction. It'll go here, but it'll try to go the other direction first. Later on, you get a relief valve where it's actually like it's in the name. Um, I'll show you a relief valve. Where's a relief valve? I think yes, no. I guess there's not a lot of relief valves in my starter base because when I built these, I never really tear anything down, so there's no space for me to add a pump and stuff. So you basically need to add a pump in front of the tank, and then it'll go up to 100%. And you have a relief valve where um, why don't I have any relief valves? Yeah, here. So it will basically release the steam anything over 75%. Um, so basically it'll let out any excess 25%, and it'll just be wasted. So the steam, I don't want it to be wasted, right? I want it to go into the power turbines. And but of course, if the steam blocks, then it blocks all my processes from down below. And so I need a way to just venting the steam. And you'll see that a lot in this mod where it's basically impossible to actually keep everything. Like a lot of the fluids you need to vent some of it. Um, Same with the gases, you'll need to vent some of it. And the other thing is not everything can be just dumped into a flare stack or into like a dumping thing. It doesn't necessarily work that way. There's a lot of chemistry that once you play the mod, you'll see. Like there's this whole page of just organic chemistry. uh, you have to make not everything is organic, but you get what I mean. There's ammonia. There's these different alkenes. Alkenes get made into like meth. You have methane. You have styrene, butadiene, um, and then what else? I've rambled on a long time already, so if you guys enjoy, just let me know. But I myself am getting tired, so I'll probably just have to split this into different episodes. And another unique thing that this mod introduces is solar thermal power. And So you have these regular solar panels. You actually don't get to. You start off of a few of these, but you don't get to make them until quite a bit into the run. But you get to make these solar thermal before where. So solar thermal is different in terms of these are. They heat up the same way that solar panels do, but they don't generate electricity directly. They generate heat. So think of this as a reactor. And these things do have neighboring bonuses. So like this one, there's a 40% neighboring bonus. This one, there's only a 20% neighboring bonus. The ratio of how many of these panels you need per heat exchanger is very complicated. um, and with the way that power works, I don't think it needs to be absolutely up to ratio either. Now, I think the mod creator will maybe hit me for saying this. Some people will say, "Oh, your ratios are totally crap," uh, but uh, but hear me out. So it's because of how random these wind turbines are, and you pretty much have wind turbines litter like everywhere, and you kind of need to um, because your logistics network need to be connected somehow, or I mean they don't. I don't know. It's up to you. But I myself, I need the logistics network connected somehow, and the relay ones that connect to the logistics. So also the logistics network. Yeah, now I'm getting to it. Logistics network has these two other things other than roboports. So instead of just the roboports, say like this is a roboport one. They have also so this does both charging and store. It stores the robots and then also connects the network, or you just have this relay that connects the network, and then you also have this charger where it only does some charging. This has very short logistics range, like only about this much, and then it won't so. But you need these everywhere to charge your robots in mid-flight instead of like a giant roboport port litter everywhere. So I literally have like wind turbines. Basically, I myself, I make a grid of these wind turbines, right? And they provide like a very consistent power. It's consistent to the point where I can actually and I have walked away from the space for like 10 hours and just let it do some stuff. When I was setting up my second mall, that's what I ended up having to do just because I didn't have enough robots and these buildings were taking forever. It wasn't going to do anything until I let it sit and produce stuff for about 10 hours where it actually worked. It worked really well. The power, nothing ever like, there's no death spirals because of how consistent um, these wind turbines do, plus the battery setup do provide, right? So, like the solar thermal setup, it actually doesn't provide very much because I think if you look at the ratio of the steam, and I think this is the heat exchanger one, so the crafting speed is one, so it's even if even if you're boiling just water, you produce 270 steam per second, and this turbine consumes 240. So with one of these, you're able to consume. You're able to only maybe. It's like you need three of these to power two turbines. Um, and then with the heat, the math of the heat, you need about 10 of these to feed into one of this heat exchanger to keep it running consistently. Of course, it's a little different if you put everything together. This is the first setup. It was bad. I didn't have any neighboring bonuses in between. But once you put everything together, it becomes a little harder to calculate. But it still ends up being at least 8 to 10 of the collectors to one heat exchanger. And um, but on the other hand, if you think about it, in between things like this heat storing in the heat pipe or heat storing in the solar collectors itself, um, in between steam storing in tanks, because this steam won't actually get consumed until your wind power falls. So there's also steam being stored. There's heat being stored. Um, Like these turbines aren't even running unless your power drops, unless they need to be. They don't. The ratio doesn't need to be perfect. you can have actually some storages, and you see that later on you actually do get specific heat storage buildings, and then you also get these Stirling engines where they can run even without any water boiling. They just run from the heat, which is pretty cool, but also I think a little bit. It's pretty a lot slower to actually get started. So yeah, they don't actually need to be in perfect uh, ratio. So that's why I just end up building these giant power setups. And I mean, you can tell that these steams are actually building. So it's not even the steam is not being consumed unless I get like a really bad power surge. Mm, so I think I'll end this episode here. If this kind of shows you guys what this mod is about, let me know. I'll post this onto the Nullius Discord as well. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for watching.